building designed by Thomas M. Bell and built circa 1950. This is an application to construct a new building. Item number 6 is an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, docket number 15-1090, block 605, lot 8, 657 Greenwich Street, in the Greenwich Village Historic District, a school building designed by Thomas M. Bell and built in the 1950s with an addition designed by Barry Rice and built in 2012. This is an application to construct rooftop and rear additions and modify openings. Commissioners, you may recall that we heard this application on February 4th, and at that time the applicants presented the proposal and we listened to public testimony, and then we adjourned. And so the applicants are back today to respond to the public testimony and to hear your comments for the first time.
So presenting the application in order will be Kate McHale from BBB, followed by Bill Higgins, and then the architects for the project, Barry Rice and Andy Ford.
questions that the project received is that the building that we are proposing is not the scale of row houses or of slightly taller tenement buildings, and that is somehow inappropriate for Greenwich Village. I think the points that I would make in response are really pretty straightforward. This view on the far left. Greenwich Village, at least since the 1920s and earlier, has derived its characteristic urban form from an interplay of buildings of various periods and scales and architectural characters. Far from being a violation or a compromise of Greenwich Village historical character, that combination of scales is in fact a powerful constituent element of the village's historical character. Views on the left, even in the narrower sort of classic little village streets like Gay Street, for example, you see this wonderful interplay of buildings that go back to the diminutive federal period scale, and in the same urban view, you are seeing later buildings of substantially larger scale and different architectural character. And in terms of the massing of the new building, which Barry Rice will get into in more detail, I think it's important to note that these larger buildings are not monolithic. They reinforce the brick plains that you find throughout the village, but they also, particularly in the upper portions, have a very rich combination of form and massing. Somehow it's under here. On the left, again, this interplay of scale is not something new. It's been going on at least since the 1920s and earlier, as you can see on the left, juxtaposing the northern dispensary with the taller one, Christopher Street from circa 1930. On the right, a major north-south artery, 6th Avenue, and Hudson Street, of course, the major street of our site, is another major north-south artery. You get this characteristic view of small-scale, intimate-scale, earlier row houses in the foreground, the intermediate building, a real characteristic landmark with a great variety of massing and materials and shapes in the midground, and then the later taller buildings behind. All of this comes together to form the characteristic composite scale that makes Greenwich Village, in our opinion, what it is. Sorry about that. That's right, if I have it. So the view on the left shows that this characteristic combination of scales is something that you find throughout the village, from east to west and from north to south. It is not limited to any one area. These views are on the western portion of the village, where again you get this characteristic combination of smaller scale and medium scale and larger scale. And just to conclude, here is the building that we are proposing and that you will hear more about. And we feel that this building responds to that characteristic combination of scales in Greenwich Village, and ending with a very significant point. Appropriateness, it seems to us, is about the way a proposal works with its experienced, real historical context. This is about the designated original Greenwich Village Historic District, and it is about the designated extensions to the Greenwich Village Historic District, but it is also about the real context in which this site exists. The archive building here is a historic building. It's an individual landmark. It is not part of the Greenwich Village Historic District. It is, however, a powerful determinative part of the historical urbanistic experience of this site and of our proposal for this site. And we think that judging the scale of this proposal is something that needs to be done not just with view to the Greenwich Village Historic also with view to this very powerful determinative element that is this right across Greenwich Street. Barry Rice will talk about the issues of the building itself.
You're out of sequence, the one on the left. So, no, go forward on the right. Back on the left. Forward on the right. Picking up where Bill left off with this view of the variously scaled buildings within Greenwich Village Historic District, and showing you on the right how our proposed building that's on the side of the parking lot at Barrow and Greenwich Street would look as framed by the gateway to Greenwich Village, the archive building on the left and 111 Barrow Street on the right. Next, please. The building is comprised of three distinct elements. The first is a base that ties in with the scale of the school along Greenwich Street and steps to address the scale of the townhouses along Barrow Street. The base is articulated in a fairly traditional way with punched windows, 1/1 windows in a brick base that recalls the detailing of the Thomas Bell School building further down the way. Above the base is a transitional element that picks up on the natural metals that exist on the site, in this case bronze, with some bronze elements being extended down into the base. This transitional element comprises some glass panels and brick panels set within the bronze brick. We're also celebrating the corner opposite the curved corners of the archive building. All the way up the building, there is a gesture along the corner, all the way to the very top, and including to the third element of the building, the campanile at the top, where the corner details of the brick, the glass, and the rounding of the brick at the base tie together to form a narrative. Next. In detail, that project is slightly out of focus on the right. I wanted to show you here the Flemish bond and silver porcelain we're using at the base of our building along Barrow Street. That recalls Thomas Bell's subtle but intricate detailing on the school building at Greenwich. Also, overall, the reading of our building along Barrow Street that steps down with terraces, with bronze railings on the terraces to respect the scale of the neighboring buildings to the east along Barrow Street. Next. In some more detail, the bronze elements are created by having column covers and slab edge covers in bronze metal to contain the panels of glass and brick. This is the elevation along Barrow Street, and in fact, if you just take this transitional piece in the building here, not the base, not the top, the percentage of glass on Barrow Street is actually 41% glass. So it is not a glass box. It is an articulated piece that helps to tie together the base of the building, that is in itself very specific to this location, and to the tower portion of the building, the campanile forms the third part of this tripartite arrangement. Next. There was comment from the public about the fact that our renderings did not show accurately the scale of our proposed building in context with its neighbors. So we've actually reshot these key renderings and superimposed in our rendering into the photo montage of the site. So here you can see on the left the composition of the archive building, the bell tower, St. Luke's Church, our campanile, and on the right the view over the gardens at Barrow and Hudson Street. Next. The third part of what I was talking about is how we're dealing with the scale of the building. I guess that's the third part. And the fourth part is the open space. Our building is proposed to be top out at 153 feet. That is to the top of the top slab of the
church have obviously been closely connected institutions with each other and with this site for a long time. And our sense is quite strongly that for the school to do the work that it needs to keep its educational mission alive and healthy, it really makes so much sense for them to do it on this site. So this is about how to design an expansion of the school that allows that to happen on the site. Two characteristics of the school which relate to the nature of the design of the addition. On the left, we have the street view, that is Greenwich Street, closest to us. The school has a relatively closed sort of character facing Greenwich Street, and on the right, facing the interior open space of the block, the school has a much more open character. We felt that was something that made great sense to continue into the proposed additions. Essential sort of philosophy for the two-story expansion is really pretty simple to describe, hard to point to. Okay. The two-story addition on the courtyard side is here, and on the Greenwich Street side is basically there. And the philosophy is a pretty simple one, that the first floor of the addition is proposed to be brick, to be harmonious with the brick of the main block of the building, have a level of detail and character that is comparable with what's there now. And at the top floor, there is more of a reflection of a whole combination of rooftop studios and rooftop mansards, and with a strong sense of the sort of, this is a school for younger children, ends in 8th grade, and there's a certain playfulness, there's a certain youthful quality, and we felt that it was appropriate to express that combination of characteristics as well. And the materials at the top are glass and metal. And the choice of the color for the metal, Andrew is going to discuss more, but basically we're looking for something that would be harmonious with the brick, but rather than making it brick red, we felt that there'd be a little bit more of a distinctive and frankly sort of celebratory character about choosing a different color that is different but compatible.
How does this look? Do we have a sample of the color?
Yes.
Yes.
This panel board has the aluminum panels and also some of the existing brick base.
You can't see the color. The light of it. So this. Which one is? The light on that, on this.
Okay, this panel detail that Carl is, I'm Andrew Morrow, by the way. This panel detail is this section of and as you can see, there's some variation Yes, yes, we were gonna paint, well, the aluminum wasn't all gonna be finished the same color, there's 3 different colors in the package of each one. So it's very, it's not all that random, since there's really not all that many panels. But yes, it's intended to feel lighter, and it's intended to create the same kind of feeling of the brick.
Is this the actual size of these panels will be, or will they be large?
They're much larger. They're actual panels. The original panels were chosen because they're laid tight with a horizontal bonding pattern. So in a sense, there's a transformation of the brick vocabulary of units. And the other reason we picked them obviously is that they're light, they don't weigh a lot, and that they allow us to have a more of an expression of what's going on inside. Where the new brick, where the building meets the old building, we've articulated these are details of our proposed gym, showing that brick takedown is also relatively modest, using the different colors within the brick, and setting the plan back 3/4 of an inch. The panels on the courtyard side are much less frequent because we're using the language of the art studio with the mansard on that side. Next one.
So on the side, what you're saying that this is the horizontal
Correct.
difference, and so this is adjacent.
That's just a diagram there, Bill, it's explaining how where the panels and the bricks.
Right, so is there any kind of vertical distinction, break, or anything?
Yes, there is, I'm sorry I don't have a slide of that detail here, but yes, there's a vertical joint, a seismic joint, always separating the new and the old. We have a drawing of that in the old set. We just have an horizontal, I'm sorry. So the color, how did we arrive at this color? And it was kind of intuitive and sort of logical at the same time. As I said, we've been thinking about metamorphosis rather than contrast or organization. So on the left, you'll see photographs of the color of the bricks that running through the building, those are the different colors. So we took the photographs and we looked for the brightest, cheeriest, most youthful pixel within that photograph. We took that and we saturated it. And then we made the idea of metamorphosis and moving forward. We rotated the color wheel about 20 degrees. And it gave us those colors on the right, which we chose from. And we put that color on this. That, I think that answers it.
Okay, further questions? Yes.
What's that big band, over the
What is this?
big box? No, yes.
Further back, that is the gymnasium.
What is that?
So that's perforated in a pattern much like the brick pattern on the other side. It shows up. It's a decorative bag going in between the two tables.
Michael,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
Sorry, it's also a panel.
It's also panel. It's a panel language. It's a metal panel
And
language.
how is it attached to the?
It's attached. There are big storefront windows behind it, and it's attached on vertical strips which fasten to a rhythm of verticals that is obviously steel here, intended to be seen. The idea being that on both sides we wanted a smaller scale opening. We didn't want to have gigantic windows on the courtyard because they would show up looking at. They wouldn't make the proper background to the church, and they would be the wrong scale on the street.
On both the renderings and the model, the color of the brick is, for the addition, is shown as being slightly richer, redder than the brick below. Is that intentional?
No, that is just a graphic. It's actually, we're matching the brick.
Here.
questions on the school? I mean, on the school additions? Anything for Barry or Bill or anybody else on the first part before we go into a consecutive discussion, starting with the new building, including the school, okay? No, any more questions before we start on the discussion?
I have a question for Bill.
Yeah.
So with respect to your discussion about the computational scales that are characteristic of Greenwich Village, I didn't see any photographs in the presentation that showed the context of the proposal in context with this combination of scales, only in context with the archive room. Is there an image that shows that it's one of those locations where you can see
Well,
a combination of scales?
I think that this rendering really shows it pretty well.
No, but looking within the district, let's just say we're setting aside or outside the district argument, just within the district,
Right.
what do you see from that site in terms of the combination of scale?
Okay, we don't have photographs from that site. What we do have are photographs from within.
So that's outside the district.
Oh, that's right.
No, but it's looking, your combination of scales relying on the building that's outside the district.
Right.
So if you were talking about, because you made this argument that there's a combination of scales, so how do you make that argument with respect to this site within the district?
If you're asking whether there is a 1920 skyscraper next to this site, there's not.
Well, but you didn't say next to, you showed great distance. You showed great distance, you were on Barrow and you looked to the ratio.
Yeah, I mean, but I guess I don't really understand the question because it seems to me that if this kind of interplay is found throughout the district, I'm not certain that we have to be able to say, oh, it's found exactly on this site. Therefore, that's
I think that to elaborate on that point, and I asked Sarah, she mentioned one of the presentations in testimony was of a site plan that showed a scale analysis of the buildings in the immediate surroundings, not just on that block or on adjacent blocks, but a fairly wide catchment area that seemed to suggest that this building and this site would be rather an anomaly in this quadrant of
If you limit this to this immediate part of the designated district, then you are not going to find that level of juxtaposition. My point would be two points. First of all, if you look at the district as a whole, and I don't just mean the eastern part of the district, I mean the district as a whole, these kinds of juxtapositions are so common as to be determined regarding the district. And secondly, I really think it's artificial to be thinking about only the district itself. When you have a historic building, individually designated landmark, that is so much a part of the historical context of this building, I really don't understand how that can be eliminated from the determination of this. And then the final thing I would say is that the commission all the time, for proposed changes and new buildings and enlargements of buildings and districts, the commission all the time considers views from outside the district as well as from inside.
Well,
Yeah, I understand. I'm just saying,
this is what we're looking for. But to that point, so if we were to take that argument and apply it to other districts, because you could apply that same argument then to Brooklyn Heights Historic District or the Upper East Side Historic District, I mean, according to that, you could take any district where there are row houses where everything is the same scale and look at it in the distance with the skyline or however far back you want to go and justify a building that's 15 stories.
I don't think, first of all, I don't think we're justifying stories. And secondly, again, if you want to stay direct just on,
appropriate.
if you want to stay just on this district and just on this immediate site, then I think your remarks have validity. But I don't see how you can ignore what's going on throughout this district, and I really don't see how you can ignore the archive. It's right there. It's part of, not part of the justification, it's part of the historical experience of this city.
Okay, other final questions, as it were, for Bill or for the school? Okay, we're gonna go. The discussion will start on the new building
Talk
first.
about it one at a time or both at the same?
Maybe one at a time, and then go back, then we'll do the school right afterwards.
Well, it's a complex application with many elements, with a lot of, the proposal had a lot of subtlety, a lot of care, right down to the joining of the brick, and it's a remarkably detailed proposal, and I think that the applicant should be praised for the care and consideration that every little detail of this has had. I think that for me, the biggest problem with the proposal, I must say that when I saw that the diagram that's going around that was presented as part of the testimony, I was very taken by it, and that it does seem to go to the heart of the issue of context and bulk, which and it makes a very compelling case that this is not a contextual solution to have a building of this height in this portion of the district. I think that if Bill's comments had been taken in the absence of that kind of analysis, I would have myself thought that the proliferation of these taller buildings was more diffuse. But in fact, it seems that they're not, that their place here on this portion of the village is fairly unusual. That said, I do think that the notion of a bright line that is kind of artificial, that you can't really say that this building is sitting in a bucolic setting with nothing for, as far as the eye can see, at the scale that it's proposing. So I think that a building that is larger than two or 3 or 5 stories is appropriate. And I think that you should look at the immediate context, and that this building can function or can belong to that context without harming the district or the immediate environs in which it sits. But for me, the reason that it doesn't work yet is not the height necessarily, but the articulation. I think that the articulation is overly complex. It creates that the cantilever is creating a second kind of frontal object to compete with and overshadow the church. And I think that the volume and kind of the architectural direction of this thing should be where the buildings are, to the south and to the west. And it should turn its face to the south and to the west. And to the degree that one can perhaps take the volume of this building, lower it, make it more street-oriented, so that it belongs with the language of the archive and of the buildings on Greenwich Street, whether that's accomplished via 74-711 or whether it's as of right. You're clearly doing enough preservation here that you could qualify for such exemptions and not feel compelled to create a very busy kind of streetscape and volume as just to conform with zoning. And I think that if you were to make the argument about what the character of Greenwich Avenue is, it would very much be of buildings that sit on the street front and rise up straight in a very heavy, blocky fashion. And I think that this building could have the same volume, have the same number of units, but be lower and be less of a confrontation to the village side by having a simpler volume, lower, and kind of less fussy with all the stepping and changes of materials. I think that would help this application considerably. I think that also the way the building meets the townhouses, it feels also, you're trying to make lots of moves to make it ameliorate its size, I don't think that's necessary by the same arguments that you're using to make the tower. Juxtapositions occur. You don't always have to kind of create a stepping setback. It just makes it very busy and very aggressive in a way. And I think that a simpler, quieter approach would be more appropriate to this very, very important corner of the village.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of those comments. I do appreciate both of the applications because of the quality of the detailing and the care towards materials. I'm listening, first of all, to the argument about the historic context. And while I agree that there are very many places in the village where you see that kind of combination of scales, this isn't actually one of those places. And then to rely on the archive building, then I get kind of concerned because, well, then I should be looking at the frontiers of all the historic districts, and there's a lot of stuff that goes on outside, across the street from a historic district. In every historic district, if we start to rely on all the towers that are built outside and so on, does that mean now applicants can come and justify all the perimeters to be not in character with the district in a certain way because they're in character with the surroundings? I agree those are artificial lines, but we drew the lines. So, or maybe they're not so artificial, maybe they were very intentional. So I do have trouble with the height here. I look around also, and it's true that the material that was provided by the testimony that helped us understand the scales around sort of pointed to what an anomaly this would be for the district. And do you call it a gateway to the district? Maybe that's an approach. But so, in terms of the form, I think that there could be a taller building on this corner. There's one across the street that's within the district. It could be probably taller than that building, but I'm not sure exactly how much and still be within context. But in terms of the massing, my biggest reaction is to what is the glass enclosure, which seems to be sort of this collar on a neck, on a very long neck that's sort of strangling it. And so I do think that the massing is not only too busy, but there are sort of too many materials going on with it, drawing attention to itself in a way that I actually don't find elegant. I think that the glass wraparound diminishes the quality of the annealing and so on. I also think that the lower level of the brickwork, there is inadequate detailing, or at least that's, as far as I can tell from the presentation, it seems kind of a bland brick articulation that should be looked at more, but I do think that lower level actually works the best in terms of the design of the project.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the comments of both Marjorie and Michael. I really just think, as the building is composed right now, it is too tall to be contextual, and I feel uncomfortable with being taller than across Barrow Street, the building that's on that side. I do think that if, and I agree that the glass aspect troubles me. I also think that if there were less complexity in the different materials and all of the different setbacks and so forth, a lower and potentially maybe longer building or something could achieve a great deal of the volume that is being looked for. And another possibility is what Michael discussed about trying to relate it more to Greenwich or Christopher, I forget which side it is. It's Christopher, I guess. Anyway, the other thing that, so I agree with a lot of those recommendations and looking at it, because I think that the brick and the company will do work rather well, but again, I think it's too high right now. So I'm looking for a way to bring down the height and also make it less have fewer materials and fewer things going on, so it's a little less drawing attention to itself. On the school buildings in general, I think they actually, oh, I'm sorry, excuse me, thank you. Okay, but are we discussing the panel work at this point on the, we're going to do that with the other, thank you, that's it? Okay.
I think Michael Goldwyn hit it right on the bullseye. And as much as I would love to engage in the discussion about the different characters and heights within the district, I would say that all you have to do is look at BRA 01, the rendering, to realize that in this particular block, on this particular site, that building overwhelms what else is going on at that site. And so I would reflect Michael's statements about being able to bring the building down by filling out that space more completely, and I agree with that completely. One other issue that I picked up, someone said at one point that we're using Flemish bond at the ground floor, which I thought, wow, that's a great contextual move, and I looked at the illustration and that's clearly not Flemish bond, and I think Flemish bond would be a more appropriate treatment of the masonry at the lower floors. To add a little, I hate to use the term context, but to add a little context.
I concur with my fellow commissioners' comments that the proportions of the building are overwhelming for the full block site, and it's very difficult to justify this kind of height within this district. So a re-envisioning of that seems to be necessary. And I'm thinking about the sizable 20th century apartment buildings that we do see in the district, and they're really not in this shape. They tend to be more tall street wall and a small low setback on the top. And I think that's probably a direction that would be found more appropriate. But in general, the height and the massing of this, I can't find appropriate for this district.
The height and bulk of the building makes it stand out to a degree that it really is overwhelming. And I think that it's not just the height, that it's also the base of the building, which I know is described as something that is a certain height because it then works with the school height or the school new height. But I think that somehow the bulk of the base and the sameness, or the fact that the masonry is pretty much the same for 4 stories. I think that that's too much bulk to the school, which is one of the objectives. So I think it's not high, but I also think that the base is and actually the entrance, if you're a person here, still walking along the space, this whole building would seem, we could just seem like something from another place. It would seem very out of place. So I think that the base needs to be considered.
I think the consensus that following Michael Goldblum's suggestion is emerging, and I think what it means is I just want to add a practical aspect, because we would certainly be my sense, support the kind of zoning intervention or the 74-711, whatever mechanism is thought about to achieve what we've spoken about here, which is basically a kind of building that meets those tests, and also that has who knows what the bulk's going to come out, but I don't see it as necessarily any significantly smaller. It's just spread out in a different way that's more appropriate, which to me is important, and I think it's an underlying premise of certainly the way I look at it, and others do, that the importance of the mission of St. Luke's, and the fact that this development, this complex, will be responding and enabled to be supported both in its mission and also in the important preservation
modest and reasonable. I think that the courtyard side is basically appropriate with a few modifications. I think that the applicant should look at the panoply of window choices that have been made and try to maybe simplify that a bit. There's like 3 or 4 different window choices, whereas I think that the existing building, what draws the ensemble together is its uniformity in the windows, and so I think that reducing that, simplifying that would be an improvement. But otherwise, I think the gym is fine, and the structure on top of the gym, the cage is also for me, in my opinion, appropriate. I think that where I think additional work is needed is on the street facades. The yellow panels, red panels, it feels to me kind of arbitrary, and commercial, and I know that it's kind of meant to convey a lyrical or youthful or somewhat light conceptual as opposed to structural quality. For me, it just feels kind of out of left field, and it neither, for me, enhances the district or enhances the building. So I would ask the applicant to look at either the material or the way it's disposed. Maybe it's just that it's setbacks are not significant enough. Maybe it lacks depth. Maybe the building that it sits on is not a building that appears to be much loved. I kind of think it's a nice building, even in its severity. I don't know, for some reason the addition isn't engaging with the existing building in a successful way. I don't have a suggestion about how to make that happen, but I would just offer that they explore either other materials or other ways of either extending it or relating to it that is more effective. For me, it's not working as a treatment, not as a volume.
Yeah, I think that the additions to the school generally are fine. I think they've been well done and articulate in interesting ways. I have exactly the same concern about this building, the corner building with the panels. That I actually, the volume is fine, but I find the colors and the panel disrupting and calling attention to themselves in a not useful way from my perspective. I could even see the same kind of articulation of the front, just without something that jumps out at me. That's how I feel about it. And that's really the only part of the school that I have a problem with.
I actually think that the school proposal is really well detailed. There's a lot of thought about each material and kind of the meaning of each material has been, even the color range has been studied, like these color rules and interpretations on the color. So it seems as if every move has been very carefully considered, which is terrific to see because it's not something we see that often, where every single move on the material has been so carefully considered. I think that the massing actually does work, sort of with massing, and I do understand that there's a limitation on the setback. It can't actually be set back any further and still function. And so and in terms of the colored panel, more kind of orangey color, I think a lot of that has to do with the rendering. The actual panels, the colors are much more subdued and more in line with the so perhaps there's movement in that color down saturation level.
presented in terms of mass and color. It says the village exuberance, I think, should be squelched, and I think that the addition does a very good job of complementing the existing building, and I can include it exactly as it is.
Michael?
I agree, I think the issues with the colors of the panels actually have much more to do with the rendering than the actual panel that we're seeing here, and I can agree with this too.
I think I'm closer to the camp here on my left than the other discussions, but I think we're all heading in the same direction, that it's an approvable with some further study and approvable addition, if that's the right word, to the school. But we'll take a look at the thing, obviously, that we have some time to do that when you're pursuing the other things. And we'll not take action on that today, and we'll close both, pursue both of those things along the lines we've discussed. And we'll act at a public meeting, but not act on either of them today. Close both hearings with a motion and a second. Without objection, the hearings are closed. Thank you.